Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Track Talk. Today's episode is an excerpt from Live from My Drum Room with Aaron Comas from April 27th, 2022. Aaron, of course, is the drummer with the band The Spin Doctors. And in this little segment, we talk about Aaron's move to New York City in the early 1990s and the formation of the Spin Doctors, and basically segueing into going into recording their first record, and at the same time, Aaron developing that signature sound that he has. And we talk about his Brady snare drum. The song Two Princes, one of my favorite songs, that incredible drum track that he plays, and the importance of that snare drum sound to that track, and how Aaron had to really stand his ground to get that sound on the record. It's an interesting story that I think needs to be told. So check it out. I'll put the link to the entire episode in here. It's a great episode. So check it out. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll see you on the other side. All right. Thanks.
By the time I got to New York, I was very aware of like being a groove drummer, playing for the song. You know, I was studying with Bernard Purdie. I just started with Bernard, started studying with Purdie. So all around this time, it was like I was studying with Purdie. I just got in the Spin Doctors, so we're just starting going, playing, you know, writing songs and starting to play gigs. So I'm really thinking that first year was when that sort of started to happen, and I think my sound style sort of developed a lot then, and then you know, go a couple years later. The band things are really happening for us in New York. We get a record deal. We have some money to get some new equipment. So I wanted to get a new kit. And I had been playing my Yamaha recording series GAD kit that I bought in high school, which I actually, oddly enough, that's the kit I'm using now on tour.
No kidding. Oh, man.
I've been using it again the last couple of years, and it's, you know, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But anyway, when we got that money to get some equipment, I was sort of searching for a new sound, and I went up to Manny's Music, and I was kind of thinking, maybe I'll get like a Sonar kit, or I don't know, I just wanted something a little different, you know. And they had just gotten these kits from Australia, Brady, and I just loved them. And so I got a Brady kit, and I got a couple of snare drums, those snares that are on that record. And, that was sort of a defining moment, I think, because there were those drums. I mean, obviously you got to make the sound of a drum, but those drums had a unique sound to them, and they, I was tuning my snare up tight. I was sort of coming out of somewhere between. I always liked the way Stuart Copeland's snare sounded, and I was getting real tired of the big, deep, heavy gated reverb '80s sound that was so big, and I didn't want to do that, And our band really didn't. We were, it was like the '90s. All of us were more into like either classic rock, or like R&B, soul, or like some of the new bands like Jane's Addiction or, Living Colour. And a lot of that stuff that was so popular in the late 80s, the heavy metal, nothing against it, but it just wasn't our scene at all. So that's sort of how I think I came with that sound. And one last funny story that I love to tell about the Brady snare sound is that when we were recording, Two Princes was one of the first things we recorded when we got our record deal. Originally we were just going to put out an EP, and so we went into the power station and we were going to cut like 5 songs. And we had 2 producers, Frank Aversa, who was like the engineer producer, and then Frankie LaRocca, who's the guy that signed us. You know Frankie probably, right?
I do, and we'll talk about him later because I was going to mention Frankie.
Yeah, anyway, great guy, great drummer. He sadly passed away about 10 years ago. But anyway, so we're in the studio and we're getting ready to record Two Princes. Power station, the A room, probably my favorite sounding room in the world. It just sounds phenomenal. And I have my Brady. I pull out my Brady piccolo. I'm all ready. I got my sound together. And the producers are really pushing for me to play like a big, deep fucking Ludwig drum. They want to like, no, this is what's on the radio now, big, deep reverb. It's like, well, I'm thinking, well, we're not, no offense, but we're not Bon Jovi or any of these bands, we're trying to do our own thing here.
Yeah.
And luckily, all the guys in the band had my back, and we really stood our ground on this one. And, and this is the difference between like being a band and being like a session guy. Because I do a lot of session work, and if the producer or the artist want me to play a big, deep drum or they have an, I'm happy to do it, no problem. And but for this situation, this was like sort of part of the sound of the band, and we really stuck to our ground. And this lasted like half the day,
No
And,
kidding.
and this is also back in the days where people would spend like a day on a snare sound,
Yeah.
Still that thin. We're like, it's like, it's just that was just the way it was back then, bloated budgets and just overkill. And so finally, we got our way, and it's a good thing because I mean I don't know how Two Princes would sound with a big deep drum.
I'm gonna just throw it out there, and Eric's guitar playing is great. Chris's vocal is great. The whole tune is great, but your snare drum, to me, that's that song, man. That's that. I mean, the intro, the sound of that drum. Good for you, man. Good for the whole band, really standing your ground like that and backing you up.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where there's a lot of sort of like there's certain. It all starts with a great song and a great arrangement and great playing and all that, but like the stars have to align. I think for something like that to happen, and like this, you're right. Like besides it being a really really great song, the sound of that track is really a big part of it. The tempo, we slowed the tempo down. The original, there's a demo out that's like, the song was a lot faster. We pulled the tempo back, sonically, all the instruments and the snare drum, it was the snare drum, as we know, I mean, it can be such a big part of the character of a track when you're recording it. It's such a huge, sort of besides the vocals, like you said, the snare drum is often like it's a huge
it's a
part
voice.
of
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
again, it's I'm grateful that it worked out, on that song.
Yeah, me too. I never knew that story. Some, I think, really good information for people to hear too. That, because when you're kind of a new band like that, you tend to be at the mercy of the producer or the engineer, and if they say, if they really push it hard, a lot of bands sometimes do have to sort of acquiesce and change the snare drum or change an arrangement or change something. But with Frankie LaRocca there, I would think that he must have been a pretty supportive guy as another drummer, and recognizing you being a great drummer, that had to, I'm guessing that helped a lot too.
Frankie was always super supportive. I mean, throughout, those years when we were with Epic and working with Frankie as our A&R guy and also co-producer, I mean, I love Frankie. But he was also coming from a different school because he played on a lot of records in the 80s,
Yeah.
He played on like the first Bon Jovi single, Runaway. That's Frankie LaRocca, and Scandal and
Good
and
Buddy You.
so he was the guy that was like, we got to have big drum sounds, and but ultimately, he had my back and he supported me because he had been in my shoes. That was what was so great with working with Frankie as an A&R guy, is that like he wasn't your typical business guy because he was a musician. He had been out there, So, but it was funny because like the sound of the drums on that record, they are pretty big. There's a lot of air in them. There's a lot of room, but the drums themselves are kind of tuned a little tighter.
Yeah.
And I love where we ended up. But at the time, if I would have had it my way, it would have been dead. Like the drums would have been dead. And if Frankie would have had it his way, it would have been huge. So it's always this battle. Like I remember we'd be tracking or mixing, and Frankie would go over to the board and he'd take the room mics and he'd go up there. And then when he wasn't looking, I'd go and I'd and Peter Dannenberg, who ended up mixing the whole record, and he also produced the rest of the other half of the record. He would hate us. He's like, guys, you got to stop this. You're fucking up the whole mix. But what was great was where we ended up in between was just perfection. And I love the drum sound to this day. The drum sound, they still sound really fresh and organic. They don't sound dated at all to me, and it was just one of those cool things.
Yeah.
Hey, Frank,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, just Frankie, man, he was the best.
Yeah. I don't think I haven't met him in person, but we spoke on the phone a bunch of times because I think when I started at Zildjian, he was still kind of actively playing in the late '80s.
Yeah.
In a band, Company of Wolves or something
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was, he was a character. He was kind of like, it was funny because I don't know, God rest his soul, I used to feel like he was sort of working me. You know what I mean? Like it's like, hey man, I've got this thing going on, and da 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 da, and
Yeah,
if
he
you
was
can,
that kind of a guy. I mean,
yeah.
he was a hustler, and he always had his shades on, and
But a
you
good
know,
dude, yeah, really
great guy.
sweet guy. And then I remember when he got on the other side of it, and he was signing bands, and I don't know that he was the connection to you. He might have been, um, but I remember there were other bands that he would call on their behalf and say,
Yeah,
can you work out a deal? Can we buy some cymbals for this band? They're just, I just signed him, and and he was the kind of guy you'd always want to help him out because you felt like he's his heart's in the right place. He's going to really do his best to try to get this band working and going, and
definitely.
minimal risk type of thing with him, and but that's yeah.
But going back to what you were saying, like about new bands, I mean, and us sticking our ground on that record, I think, it's really important, I think, for bands and artists to just do their own thing because, I mean, I've seen so many, great bands or talented artists sort of crash and burn by trying to do what was popular at the moment or doing what the record company thought was going to sell. I mean, I've just seen it happen so many times. And the truth is, like, people want to hear something fresh. They don't want to hear what's maybe popular right now, so it's like nobody can predict that. So at the end of the day, just do what you do, and that was always what we did. We really didn't pay any attention to the trends at all, and so I think because of that, it ended up, it was like a little bit of a fresh sound. It wasn't any super innovative, groundbreaking thing, but it was just like there was a freshness to it that was unique,
Absolutely. No, I would 100% agree on that. It was, and I think you did break a lot of some new ground too. But I mean the sound, and it's interesting because in my recollection, Aaron, your snare drum sound, even, it was a Brady snare drum, like you said, it had been around for a while. People had been using it, but because you were using it on a pop record, a hit record, a couple of hit records between Little Miss Can't Be Wrong and Two Princes, and the record itself, which was huge, like you kind of catapulted to this place as a drum hero, and then you had this unique sound as totally different from anybody at that time that was out there.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. No, man, to your credit, you had a vision, you had an idea of what you were trying to do, and you could have just gone, okay, man, I'll go with a deep Ludwig, and I'll, and a emperor head, and I'll put my, muffle it really flat, and get that gate it or whatever. But you stuck to your ground, you got that sound, and that became a sound like a lot of people then wanted to emulate. So.
Well, that's cool. I appreciate you saying that, and it's always nice to hear that.
Just go ahead now, and if you like to tell me, baby, just go ahead now, and if you wanna buy me flowers, just go ahead now, and if you like to talk for hours, just go ahead now. that's what I said now. Princes who adore you, just go ahead now. One has diamonds in his pockets, and that's a friend now. This one who wants to buy you rockets, ain't in his head now. Marry him or marry me, I'm the one that like it, but can't you see? I ain't got no future or family tree, but I know what a prince and lover ought to be. I know what a prince and lover ought to be. Said if you want to call me baby, just go ahead now. And if you like to tell me maybe, just go ahead now. And if you wonder about me flowers, just go ahead now. And if you like to talk for hours, just go ahead now. And if you want to call me baby, just go ahead now. And if you like to tell me maybe, just go ahead now. And if you like to buy me flowers, just go ahead now. And if you like to talk for hours, just go ahead now. If you want to call her baby, just go ahead now. And if you'd like to tell her maybe, just go ahead now. If you want to buy me flowers, just go ahead now. And if you'd like to talk for hours, just go ahead now. Oh, baby, just go ahead now. Oh, just go ahead now. Oh, your majesty, just go ahead now. Come on, forget the king. Just go ahead now. Come on, come on, come on, just go ahead now. Yeah, just go ahead now. If you want to buy me flowers, just go ahead now.
All right, well, that's my show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like, leave me a comment. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. Remember, all these episodes are available as podcasts on all podcast platforms. So download them, check them out, tell your friends, give them away as Christmas gifts. I do appreciate your support. Remember, no drummers are ever harmed on Live from My Drum Room or Track Talk. And drummers, when in doubt, leave it out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll see you again real soon. Thanks.